Welcome back. This is video 2 in my series on creating a double-headed slider in SwiftUI. In video 1, we set up the project and we got a thumb in the slider to look very much like the thumb in the slider that comes with iOS. In step 2, we're going to do the same with the bar. Let's get started. So we're back here where we started pretty much. We're going to need a bar underneath this circle here. So let's add a Z-stack. And we'll put a rectangle there. And again, it's huge. Frame, height of 3. That looks pretty close. Let's move this value down a little bit so that we can see it. Okay, I think that that is correct. But if you look closely, it's not a rectangle, it's a rounded rectangle. Corner radius of 2, maybe? Oh, that looks close. All right. That looks good. It is, if you look closely, it's just 1 pixel above that one, which is kind of interesting, but that's an easy enough thing to do. We just offset Y by 1. And now they're lined up well. Okay, now we're going to need a foreground color. We'll start with that gray, but it's going to be way too dark. We're going to need a custom color here, private let unhighlighted bar color, UI color with a white of 0.8, alpha of 1. See how close that is. Okay, I'm not gonna waste your time again. It's closest I can get is 0.86. That is mighty close. Okay, now that's the right side of the slider. But the left side of the slider, or in our case, the selected part, the range part, is this accented color, but that's very easy for SwiftUI because there's actually just a constant called accent color. And actually it's not a constant on UI color, it's a constant on SwiftUI's color value. So what I just did there, I just copied that first rectangle, I put another one on top of it and gave it the accent color, which is exactly the same color as the iOS slider. But that's not what I want. I don't want them to be on top of one another. I want them to be next to each other. And this is some magic with SwiftUI. I just take these two, I put them in H stack. SwiftUI calculates that they should be the same length each, and then just puts them next to each other like that. And it's like no issue. It's kind of a little nuts, right? Um, but of course I've got them backwards. So let's just take that and move it up there. And we'll reindent everything here. Okay. Let's see how similar these are. Let's move this H stack back to a V stack and make the value 0.5. And boy, that looks pretty close. The iOS slider might have some little nuances that we don't. The thumb still isn't perfect, but I'm pretty happy with that look. I'm going to say that the appearance is pretty much done. I would say that this looks a whole lot like that. This thumb looks a whole lot like the iOS thumb. This bar looks a whole lot like the iOS bar. So we're ready to move on to actually displaying a value and maybe even letting the user change the value. But before we do that, there is just a lot of code here. And the code that's here, it isn't really functional code. It's just explaining what the different parts of the slider look like. This is a thumb. This is an accent, or this is an unaccented bar section. This is an accented bar section. It's really not. It's appearance code. It's not. I'll call it logic. So having it here as we move on to some of the other things that we need to do, it's just going to make this very cluttered. So before we move on, I'm going to refactor some of this out. And I'm going to start with the thumb here. I'm going to create a new view. I'm going to call it thumb. And it's a view, and because it's a view, it has a body. And I'm going to make it file private because the only code that should ever care about this thumb is the code in this file, the double-headed slider. Nothing else should ever care what a thumb looks like or anything like that. So I'm just going to take this code here and I'm going to comment it out, and I'm going to replace it with thumb. Whoops. I'm going to copy it first, then comment it out, and replace it with thumb. And I'm going to paste it there. And there are these constants here that it needs to know about, and only it needs to know about them. So I'm going to just cut them out of there and put them down here. And I'm going to hit Command B, and everything compiles fine. I'm going to hit Resume, and everything looks exactly the same. So I call that a successful refactoring. And all I'm going to do here is delete that commented code there. Now I'm going to do the same with these bar sections, but they're a little bit more involved because they don't always look the same. This one is accented, this one isn't. And so I need to take that into account when I do this next refactoring. But let's start working. File private, struct bar section. It's just a section of the bar. It's a view. It has a body. And I'm going to copy one of these out. Doesn't really matter which one. And I need this constant here, so I'm going to just cut that out and move it down here. Now, this color is dependent on state, whether this section is supposed to be accented or not. So I'm going to add a constant here called accented, and I'm going to spell it correctly. And then I'm going to create a private var called bar color, and that's going to tell me what color should appear in this section of bar. And so it's going to be a SwiftUI color. And I'll replace that. And now, if the bar is accented, I want to return the accented color. If the bar isn't accented, I want to return this other color. They both need to be SwiftUI colors, so I'm going to wrap that in a SwiftUI color initializer so that now unhighlighted bar color and accented bar color are the same, or accented color are the same type. And I'm going to use the ternary operator here. If you don't remember, the ternary operator is that thing that lets you write an if-else statement in one line. You know, you say if something is true, if something is true, then return this, otherwise return that. And in one line you have, you know, that whole thing. Now, this is hugely valuable in SwiftUI because there are a lot of places in SwiftUI where you have a situation where sometimes you want a parameter to be one thing, sometimes you want it to be another. And if you filled your code with if-else statements everywhere, you would have a lot of duplicated code and it would get hairy fast. So make the ternary operator your friend. And I'm going to use it here. I'm going to say if we're accented, then I want to return SwiftUI's accent color. Otherwise, I want to return unhighlighted bar color. And now all I need to do is I need to come up here and comment out these two sections and replace them with bar section accented true, and then bar section accented false. And I'm going to hit Command Option P, which will refresh the preview, and everything looks exactly the same. So that's a successful refactoring. I delete this commented code, and look how much better that is. What's a double-headed slider? It's a thing that has some bar sections in a row next to each other with the thumb over top of that. How do we create those things? Well, that's all implementation details down here. But that's what we need to know about a double-headed slider. And now we're ready to move on to actually making the thumb be in different places depending on the value.